Dom Filloux brings over 3 decades of medtech experience to his role as Chief Development Officer at Fogarty Innovation. So that makes him a colleague. In this capacity, he advises and coaches Fogarty resident companies with a focus on R&D, operations, quality assurance, quality management systems, and regulatory and clinical affairs. Prior to joining Fogarty, Dom served as Chief Operating Officer at Minerva Surgical. During his 14-year career there, he led the development of the first endometrial ablation product to significantly advance clinical effectiveness since 2001. His career spans from designing technology for Navy SEALs to diving into medtech development while learning a few valuable lessons along the way, which he's going to share with all of us. So, Dom, you can take it from here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Ingrid. Well, hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Again, big thanks to the D by D team for inviting me to share a bit of my journey, both professionally and personally, and some key lessons that I've picked up along the way. So some parts of my path are probably what you'd expect from an engineering type, but others maybe not so much. And honestly, there were a few points along the way when my career almost didn't happen at all. And I just realized I need to turn on my timer so I keep track of that. So, all right. So growing up, I was a really active, hands-on kid who really did not like the school situation and the structure of school and all of that kind of stuff. I liked learning. I just didn't like learning in a classroom, partly because I had a really hard time sitting still. What I really did love was building things. I'd take on all sorts of little projects at home, growing colorful mold in petri dishes, making go-karts, making skateboards. At one point, I rigged up a pair of wooden skis to try to ski down the grass hill behind my parents' house. It didn't end well, but I learned something there as well. Also learned how to fix cars by holding the flashlight for my dad when my dad would work on the cars late at night because he had a job where he'd spent a lot of time at work. What helped me succeed in school, though, even though I wasn't all that thrilled at being there, is that I had a really strong memory and I could get by without taking notes or doing much studying. But eventually it kind of became a crutch for me. I leaned on it too much and never really built good study habits. As an example, I took piano lessons as a kid, and instead of learning how to read music, I simply memorized the songs. And fast forward to adult life, when I went to try to learn how to play the cello as an adult, I had to learn how to read music from scratch. And eventually, this pattern of relying on my memory really kind of caught up with me. It all came to a head for me in college. I was studying mechanical engineering at UCSD, and I kept relying on my memory instead of developing better learning tools. And as the materials got harder, that approach just didn't work, and it really started to show in my grades. At the same time, I got some very interesting hands-on jobs at Scripps Institute of Oceanography, which was part of UCSD. And I stayed busy doing stuff, which I loved, but it also gave me another excuse not to study. To be honest, my undergrad experience was rough. It took me 5 years to finish, and I came very, very close to dropping out of college in my fourth year. I was definitely not anyone's idea of an academic star. So why am I sharing this with you? Well, because if you look at where I started, you probably wouldn't predict where I ended up today in the latter years of a career that I absolutely love and a life that I've found incredibly fulfilling. And what really got me here came down to two key traits. The first is curiosity. I've always had a heavy dose of curiosity in almost anything, and belief that anything, or at least almost anything, is possible, and viewing that with an all in mindset. So let's start with curiosity. I never liked the expression curiosity killed the cat because it makes curiosity sound like a bad thing. But in my experience, it's been the exact opposite. Curiosity has been like a catalyst for a lot of great things in my life and core to things that I find enjoyable. For me, curiosity is also a little bit like a thread or the end of the yarn on a ball. If you start pulling on it, it starts taking you places, and a lot of them are unexpected. It's how I'm wired, and it's how I'm interested in how things work, why they happen, and what's around the next corner. I was always outside exploring, diving, sailing, spending time in the mountains, constantly looking around me, asking myself why and how in all of the things that I saw. So after a few years of working in the working world, curiosity is actually what pulled me towards business school. It was the first time I actually chose to go to school, and that actually made a very, very big difference. I was totally engaged and I did really well. And most importantly, I really enjoyed it. The second trait that made a really big impact in me with me is this belief that all things are possible if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and go all in. And it's not dreaming big in some vague ethereal way. It's about taking action. It's about looking at something that looks either very difficult or impossible and saying, okay, well, maybe not. How could this be doable? Is there a way forward? And that mindset energizes me. It helps me see the open doors where others might see walls. To think of it as a life lens that through which you look at things. Of course, you got to deal with reality, but the idea is that choosing to believe that there's a way forward makes that path more visible, even if it's quite faint at first. And I owe a lot of that perspective to my parents, two of my greatest mentors. They immigrated to the US from France, and they worked incredibly hard. And that work ethic and the belief that anything is possible if you commit to it, I got that from them. On this slide, you'll see three boats. The boat on the left in 1950 was the boat that my dad joined a couple guys with and sailed from France across the Atlantic into the Caribbean and up the eastern seaboard. He decided it was something he wanted to do and he just went after it. Within 3 years, he had gone back. He wrote a book and made a movie, by the way. Uh, within 3 years, he had gone back to France, married my mom, who's the lady on the left, and they built the boat that you see in the middle picture, and they did it themselves. And within 3 years of building that boat, they were out on the adventure of their life, sailing the boat. Actually, you can see my little brother in the dinghy in the front. They were living on the boat, living on the intercoastal waterway, and doing what they loved. And that's really the message: is if you're interested in stuff and you do what you love, you, you find ways to be optimistic and get things done. So how did I end up with the fulfilling career that I have? Well, despite my educational mediocrity, it was a mix of serendipity and a lot of hard work. My curiosity, my diving experience, the work that I did on Navy-related projects at Script, they all helped me land an interview with a startup in Belmont here on the peninsula in California. And guess what? They made diving equipment for the military. So I flew up for the interview. It was like 3 months before I was graduated, and most everybody else had a job, but I didn't. But the interview lasted all day, and by the end of it, I was totally hooked. The job combined everything that I loved: hands-on engineering, diving, ocean science, even leveraged my Navy work. It was a dream first job, and I actually pulled more all-nighters in that first few years working that job than I ever did in college. I was designing high-end diving systems for the Navy, and I got to test them myself. The person in the left two pictures, that's actually me. So pivoting into medtech. So that rebreather project led me into studying pulmonology, human metabolism, and exercise science. Because at the end of the day, rebreathers are a lot like anesthesia machines, except they're not in a cart. They go in a backpack on your back, and they just deliver oxygen and scrub CO2. They don't deliver narcotics. But that was my bridge into the medical device world. My first med tech job was with a cardiovascular startup called Endovascular Technologies in Menlo Park. And again, kind of similar theme. After an all-day interview as what would become the 15th employee of the company, I really wanted in. And so I took the only open job at the time, which was a senior manufacturing engineer. I ended up staying there for 8 years through an IPO and eventually through the acquisition by Guidant Corporation. And during that time, my wife and I also had four totally awesome kids. From there, I followed my curiosity from one medical specialty to another: focused drug delivery, devices for coronary and peripheral vascular disease, structural heart repair, a couple stints in aesthetics, and most recently, a pretty long time in women's health at Minerva Surgical. And as I gained experience in all of these jobs, I stepped into leadership roles across R&D, operations, quality, and clin reg. And I found what really, really brought me joy in all of these jobs was the mentoring component of the job, sharing what I'd learned along the way with the people with whom I worked. And that's what brought me here to Fogarty. I joined the Fogarty team last fall as Chief Product Development Officer, and I get to do exactly what I love, which is share hard-earned knowledge and lessons with folks earlier in their career and journeys. All that said, curiosity and drive can come at a cost. Staying balanced is tough. I've always been a very active person involved in a lot of different things. And for a long time, I didn't do such a great job with balance. And honestly, I think my wife would agree when I say I'm still a work in progress. But the work we do is hard and it can be all consuming. And so it's really important that if you're not intentional about keeping balance in your life, it'll catch up with you. Learning to keep balance in your life is a skill that should be exercised just like all of the others. So everyone's vet trip through their career is different. Different characteristics are important to them, and what works for them might be what worked for me, maybe not. But these two things, curiosity and optimism, and the idea that almost anything is possible, is really powerful. It's helped me build a great career in a life that I'm actually incredibly grateful for, even though my early years didn't predict it. So to close, I'm going to leave you with a couple of quotes that I really like. Um, this one is a little more serious. Opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. And the second one is a little more fun, but still true. A quote by a guy I really admire a lot, Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder of Patagonia, but was also a blacksmith making climbing equipment in his garage back in the 60s in Ventura. When everything goes wrong, that's when the adventure starts. So there you have it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dom. That was fantastic. That is quite a journey. And you were blessed to have some parents who taught you one really good valuable piece of advice, which was I see throughout resilience. I mean, you
Yes.
just hung in there. So thank you for that. Thanks for sharing your story.